Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to Historic Gambles podcast. I'm your co-host, Jason Yosifovski.
I'm Kyle Wada.
And Jocelyn Burpee.
And today we'll be talking about some historic gambling incidents throughout history and why they're significant. So today we're going to start in 1919 with the 1919 World Series that was played between the Chicago White Sox and the Cincinnati Reds. The Reds won that series 5-3. Back in those days, series games were decided in a best-of-9 game series. But that's not why this series is significant. There was a major scandal in this series. 8 players on the 1919 Chicago White Sox World Series baseball team were accused of throwing the series or losing intentionally. They were all reportedly paid anywhere between $70,000 and $100,000 as a bribe. Adjusted for inflation in 2025, that would be $1,310,885 to around $2 million in that range. So this was a substantial amount of money, considering the average MLB salary in 1919 was around $3,000 to $4,000, with the highest earner being Ty Cobb at $20,000. Shout out Detroit Tigers. 1 year after the series, in September of 1920, all 8 players testified in court and admitted to taking bribes. Later on in 1921, the indicted were all acquitted due to insufficient evidence. It is believed that their official confessions were stolen. One of the players, Joe Jackson, better known as Shoeless Joe Jackson, was a part of the 8 men indicted and acquitted. Shoeless Joe is one of the most famous names on the team, probably because of how he was portrayed on the big screen by Ray Liotta in the 1989 film Field of Dreams. Joe and the other 8 men received a lifetime ban from Major League Baseball for their actions. But many people believe that Shoeless Joe took the money but did nothing to throw the series, because if we take a look at Joe Jackson's stats from the series, he led the White Sox in hits and RBIs and was the only White Sox to go yard in the series.
So, Jason, why would someone steal it?
Well, I believe that someone would steal it because back in the early 1900s, gambling and racketeering was most commonly controlled by organized crime, the mafia, right? There was a couple alleged gamblers, but none were brought to trial for the White Sox scandal. But a common name mentioned was the banker who allegedly set up the whole scandal. This was a man by the name Arnold Rothstein. Rothstein was also known as the Brain, the Fixer, or the Big Bankroll. He was a known gambler, and he was a known associate of Lucky Luciano, another famous mobster. You may have heard that name before. Rothstein may have done more to corrupt sports and in turn encourage reform in sports than any other person in the early 20th century. Rothstein was indicted but never convicted of fixing the 1919 World Series. Rothstein made most of his money as a mobster during the Prohibition, but he was a gambler, which subsequently led to his death in 1928, when he was gunned down by a man who allegedly owed him large gambling debts.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason. I'm going to kind of move on here and build off of this scandal into the 1920s and eventually into the Great Depression. So, following 1919 were the Roaring '20s, and this is a time of happiness, sports being very popular, and a lot of spectating on these sports, and a lot of money involved. However, devastation hit the economy in 1929, which was the start of the Great Depression era. This consisted of high unemployment, many Americans under, extreme financial strain. But sports continued to be a relevant part of this era, and I think it was very interesting to find out that while unemployment grew and banks were going bankrupt, the boxing market stayed very strong. Possible reasons of this, were that boxing is something that anyone can technically do or afford to do. And, with high payouts, people wanted to continue boxing. One of the most famous was one by the name of James Braddock, Cinderella Man, if anyone's seen that movie, one of my favorites. But another thing about this boxing market is that people didn't stop spending money on the fights. Not just boxers, but you know, spectators continue to fill stadiums. Um, why this is the case, I don't really know. I couldn't find anything specific on it, but it is true that stadiums continue to fill. Emotionally driven fans continue to spend money on a night of boxing and betting on it. And so while jobs and incomes dropped, the income effect did not apply to boxing. Um, so, you know, part of this boxing market, a huge reason for, it being such a relevant part is the illegal betting going on at the time here. There was a lot of corruption, fixing, integrity issues following the Black Sox scandal in 1919. And this consisted of a lot of mob-connected betting rings, which became very popular, especially during this time of economic desperation. And I think that's a really important theme in this time, and why gambling was so relevant is people looking to achieve high payouts and a way out. So, moving on, 1931 is an important time here, and this is when Nevada legalizes gambling, and licenses were granted to places including Reno, Las Vegas, which we know, today Las Vegas has become the gambling and entertainment capital of the world, very famous for its casinos, sporting events, nightclubs, all the above. But, at the time, Nevada was in a sharp decline in their economy. They had originally been big in mining, but that was at the time the main economy driver, but that was really declining. And so legalization of gambling brought tourism, revenue, and helped boost the economic development during a very difficult time. It also brought legitimacy to gambling, so they could license it, collect taxes on it, and regulate. And as we were saying, at the time, this was, people were losing, confidence in the integrity of sports following the Black Sox scandal and all the betting rings. And so that scandal highlighted, this need for regulation and integrity in sports. And, another important piece of information here is that Nevada has continued to pull tax revenue off of this, and it actually gambling taxes account for the largest state of Nevada's overall state taxes to this day. Another sports market during this time that did well was horse racing, and that was always kind of a important part of American sports betting, but it became legal again really across the country throughout the 1930s, also as an economic stimulus. Now, Nevada was the only one that legalized straight gambling at the time, but horse racing was originally only legal in Kentucky and Maryland, but became much more popular throughout the Depression. So once again, I think this Great Depression highlighted a time of major economic stress and economic desperation, and people were lured in by large payouts, which really boosted gambling and the Nevada economy at the time.
So Kyle, you mentioned the question on boxing fights still filling stadiums. What are some of the reasons that you think this happened?
Yeah, so like I said, I don't have any real evidence, and hopefully we can find some out there. But, I do have some thoughts on this. I think, specifically boxing and fighting sports, were a big escape from reality. Shout out Dr. Derek. He said, boxing is a sport of people who have nothing. And I think this is very true, though. It's a high-intensity sport. There's a lot of physicality, anger, and, I don't think that for most spectators, any other event or sport could bring them, further from reality. Another reason is going back to people being lured in by large payouts. boxing was a very popular sport to bet on at the time, and so I'm sure many people were hoping to get money out of these fights.
Thanks, Kyle. I'll be talking about how sports gambling evolved over time. So, obviously, you see it evolve into the ease and convenience that you see today. The technology usage with our mobile phones and computers allows us to have a phone in our hand that allows us to bet any moment of the day wherever you are. There's also promotion through TV broadcasting, and it's being advertised on screen during every game or sporting event. As Kyle mentioned, horse racing was a big event at the time, and it started out betting on horse and dog racing, but now has eventually evolved into placing bets onto the sports of baseball, football, and many others. After scandals such as the Black Sox scandal that Jason mentioned and described, in other events, this started to give examples of the cons that may be produced from sports gambling. Due to this negative attention, many states started to place bans relating to sports betting many years ago. Kyle talked about in 1931 about how Nevada introduced legal betting, and because of this, there were many frameworks in place that other states were able to rely on. But back in 1961, the federal government decided to enact the Wire Act, which was an attempt to stop organized crime and illegal sportsbook operations that were occurring. By putting this act into place, the industry still conducted itself, but they just moved their operations underground and still ran in secret through backroom deals and bookies making secretive bets. Now, more recently, in May of 2018, the U.S. Supreme Court struck down the Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act of 1992. This was a federal statute that had restricted legal betting to primarily just the state of Nevada for 26 years. They had claimed that it had violated the 10th Amendment, which states that any powers that aren't delegated to the federal government through the Constitution belong to the people. Due to this landmark decision in this arena, the legal betting industry had a massive and rapid expansion all over the United States. Now, due to social media, there are so many places to source information about betting. Anyone can get their hands on tips and strategies to best bet on sports games, as well as potentially sports betting communities through Twitter, Reddit, and many more. Off of social media, there are also now many more models and algorithms that have been developed and available that are important tools for modern bookmakers. This helps to give more accurate predictions and also allows for other adjustments. These changes allow for more trust within the betting community and allow more people to bet. Not only is there social media and technology coming into play, but also huge events that are largely televised even around the world and not just in the US. For example, the Super Bowl in 2024 brought in $23.1 billion in legal wagers that was shown in a survey done by the U.S. Gambling Industry Organization. This was already a record-breaking viewing event with 123.7 million people tuning in on Sunday night. So it's not just football, but there's also the MLB World Series games, for example, always having advertisements popping up on their screen from major companies such as FanDuel, DraftKings, and BetMGM, which I am sure most people have heard of at least one of these companies. The most recent World Series in October of 2025 between the LA Dodgers and Toronto Blue Jays brought in a record-breaking 51 million viewers. Sporting events are continuing to grow in viewership, and with that, sports betting will as well. Now connecting all of this to a recent event and also kind of relating back to the Black Sox scandal in 1919 and how they threw the World Series game, a recent story just broke about the MLB team of the Cleveland Guardians. Two Guardians pitchers, Luis Ortiz and Emmanuel Clase, have been taken into custody for conspiring with sports bettors starting in 2023. The pitchers would communicate what pitchers they would throw and what speeds as well. Clase would throw balls in the dirt outside the strike zone to ensure that he would get the first pitch at bat called a ball by the umpire. According to the unsealed indictment, both were helping bettors from their home country of the Dominican Republic. Clase was first put back on leave back in July of 2025 during the season when there were questions arising about certain suspicious betting patterns. They are being charged with money laundering conspiracy, wire fraud conspiracy, and conspiracy to influence sports betting contests by bribery. These top charges could provide up to 65 years in prison each, and both Clase and Ortiz could be banned forever from the MLB if they are found guilty. This is an example of how seriously it is taken when sports betting is done incorrectly and illegally. It is more open to the general public now, but athletes are usually not allowed to bet on their own sport. It even extends to college sports and the NCAA. Not only are strict rules placed on the athletes, but also the people who work in any capacity for the NCAA or its teams. In the relatively short time that sports betting has been around, it has changed immensely. It used to be on a smaller scale and had to be in person due to the lack of technology. Now with the technology boom and rise of social media platforms, it is everywhere and has changed in so many forms. Anyone can access betting apps through a few clicks on their phones. Laws have come and gone, but it seems like sports betting is here to stay. It's just a question of what form it will show up in.
Yeah, and I think that's a super important topic, especially right now, integrity in sports. I don't know if you saw, I think just recently the NFL is investigating, well, of course, their own scandals, but, how much player props they're going to be moving forward with going in the future. I think that's definitely an interesting question right now.
I agree. Thanks again for tuning in to Historic Gambles. I'm Jason Yosifovski.
I'm Kyle Wada.
And I'm Jocelyn Burpee.
Thank you. We will see you next time.